You are listening to Cemetery Confessions, the world's #1 goth talk podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Cemetery Confessions. This week we've got a much more casual show. We're going to be answering some of the hottest questions from Reddit. We're going to be giving our advice for how to get started in the scene, how to protect yourself from being taken advantage of, and how to defend yourself from people who are dicks. We're going to be talking about the relevance of aesthetic signifiers and other subcultures that kind of take those and make them their own and what that means for goth. We're going to be talking about the experience of being goth when you are mixed race. We're going to be giving advice on music and how to find new bands, what you should be listening to. It's going to be a laid-back, chatty episode, lots of good advice, and we are here with two guests. I, as always, am the Count. I'm here with my co-host, Trey. Our guests this week are Lady India, who is a performer, an artist, and an absolute delight. You can find all of her projects, of course, linked in the show notes, but you can primarily find her at Phantasmagoria on any social media. It's run by her production company, Antibiotics Productions, and it is a Chicago-based burlesque show. But she does a lot of other creative projects, so I highly recommend you give those a look. I'm really excited to chat with her. We've been friends for quite a while, and if you listen carefully, you may hear some commentary from the ghost that haunts the halls of her house. So grab something to drink, take off your pants, and let's get started where we always do, learning a little about Lady India. When did you first become introduced to goth? What was your origin story?
Gosh, all right, where do I actually start? I'm actually thinking about how I grew up, which was I was the only person of color, and I don't know if you know where the suburb is, but it's Hinsdale is where I grew up. And I was already outcasted to begin with and kind of a misfit on my own. We didn't have a lot of money. And, you know, you think about it, like Hinsdale people, like, how do you not have a lot of money living there? But it happened. So happened that it was a property that was bequeathed to us. It was really, really old, like ancient old, like it was a converted farmhouse, like a barn, actually. So that paired with just not having a whole lot of friends, you just and having this really old property with a lot of really strange and powerful vibrations, like, sorry to use that, but I mean, we'll be honest here. You just find yourself not really fitting in and kind of going towards something that's more inclusive. And I found the alternative culture to be an incredibly open-minded and inclusive facet of subculture that it just resonated properly with me, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when did you, like, what was your first exposure, or what was the first time you went to a goth club, or the first, or all, like, did you get into metal, or did you get into post-punk, or did you, how did that happen?
It's so funny. I didn't have anything like that growing up because we just didn't have exposure to it with, like, we had like the most basic cable. So it would be when I went over to my friend's house. I think I might have been like 10 years old, and I had never, ever seen a Marilyn Manson video in my whole life. And I know that's like the typical thing to say, but it's fact. And I was like, who is this sexy, sexy human being? Like, who looks like a woman, but talks like a man. And I was like, I wasn't even 10 yet, I don't think. And I was just like, hell yeah. I just fell in love with it. And then pretty soon, like, teachers were asking me as a fourth grader if there were problems at home because I was drawing women at the edge of cliffs with like dead people below them and stuff.
I had many similar conversations for shit like that. Yeah, was that kind of your eye-opening moment? Did you have any kind of like coming home moment where you met
dude,
other
it
weird
was
people?
like it was a sexual and spiritual like awakening. I know
Mm,
as silly as it sounds, I was just like, oh yeah, this is it. This is what I'm gonna look
yeah,
at. I think,
yeah.
when you have like that click moment.
When did you start getting involved with performance art and that kind of thing?
That's a good question. Well, I actually started dancing when I was 16, and performance art was not incredibly novel to me. But I mean, the only reason why I'm not like tattooed up to the gills is because I did Middle Eastern dancing for so long.
Mm,
Middle Eastern dance, you can't have ink. Like you kind of look, I don't know, like they're typical pretty girl, right? Um,
Hmm.
so since I had already dedicated myself to that, I didn't want to spoil it. But now I think we moved into more tribal aspects, things like that. So
mm,
performing with a more inclusive idea of what goth could be as belly dancer, and then eventually as a sideshow performer and a darker performer, that kind of just snowballed eventually. And I think it really started mostly snowballing in my late 20s. That's when Lady India really was born.
Do you feel like that's because I mean I've seen you perform at goth events and stuff. Do you feel like that is part of the goth scene, or are you more involved in like other communities
I
for
would
that?
say my heart is in the goth scene, but in order to maintain like a performing life, I do need to be accessible to other scenes.
Right.
And that just kind of came with the territory of becoming like appearing eclectic. But to be honest, I thought it was kind of cool that like I was just like, why are there no like performers in the goth scene? Like
Mm-hmm.
we should have like variety here. It's nice.
Yeah, we have some, but most of the people who are in the goth scene seem to gravitate more towards the visual arts
Yeah.
or potentially some music. But yeah, there aren't that many that are interested in dance. I mean, I definitely hang out with the belly dance circles a lot as well.
Yes, you
And
do.
there's a surprisingly small amount of crossover, um, which always shocked me.
It actually kind of shocks me too, because there is actually a goth belly dance tribe. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they're called like I think they're called like the Black Silk Veil, something like that, or the Black Veil. Not like Black Veil Brides, no. Mm-mm.
Right, right.
Oh
I'm
God.
trying to remember if I can think of who you're referring to.
What? Her name is May, MEA, or excuse me, MAE,
I know May the Belly
and
Dancer.
that's
I've
right.
definitely seen
She was the
her.
founder of this belly dance troupe, and it really was one of the only goth belly dance troupes that I had known of in Chicago.
Yeah,
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, Serpent Fuse kind of leans that way, and then
Hmm.
there's why am I blanking on her name? Because I know her personally, but I don't remember what her belly dance name is.
You're thinking about like
Um,
Rachel Bryce or Deb Rubin?
no, no, no. She's a local. Um,
Oh, okay, right on.
um, she's oftentimes goes by the scariest belly dancer in Chicago, and I'm totally
Oh, I
blanking on her
don't
name.
know her. Wow, it's been a while since I've been in the belly dance scene. I've been frequenting the sideshow scene a lot more lately. That's
Moxie.
pretty
That's what I'm
cool.
looking for. Moxie.
Oh, Moxie.
Yeah, I
Yes,
actually
I
went to
do
high
know
school with
Moxie.
Moxie. Moxie was the one who actually introduced me to the goth scene. Actually,
Really?
yeah,
That's surprising.
yeah.
Have I ever met them?
I don't believe you've met Moxie.
All right, well, let me just kind of set the stage here for what we're doing for most of the rest of this episode. We're doing essentially a Q&A, except these questions come from Reddit. I went through like 20 or 30 subreddit pages and to pull out some questions that people were asking on the Goth forum.
That's
And
dedication.
yeah, and I haven't read any of the actual the threads, the responses, because I didn't want to be influenced by that. But I do have some thoughts on these. Hopefully, these are relatively common questions, and we can have some interesting things to say.
I think
so
these
I think we'll
could
just
be a really fun romp. So thanks for pulling them.
yeah. Oh, for sure. So let's jump into the first one we've got here with the headline "Tired of Being Called an E-Boy." And this this John wrote this actually. No, just kidding. Can he hear me? Is he still there?
Yeah, you.
I didn't hear him groan, so.
I don't know what an e-boy is.
Of course you wouldn't. You pure, beautiful child. So, all right.
I'm an isolated child, actually.
You're the Byron of our time.
That's fair.
All right, so let's see. So this person asks, it's pretty self-explanatory, but I swear almost every other friend I have calls me an e-boy because of the way that I dress. I listen to goth music, and I like to dress more on the subtle side because I'm not the greatest at DIY. The whole trend of e-girls, e-boys has really annoyed me, and I wish I didn't get grouped with it as often as I do. I also really don't want to be one of the people that goes on the same rant about how they're wrong and whatever, but every few years there seems to be some sort of darker clothing aesthetic that gets in and out of trend. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but it's annoying. What?
Just, are you not going to explain to me what an e-boy is?
Let me see if I can explain it. An e-boy so there's e-boys and e-girls. It's a subculture that popped up in the last, I want to say 3 or 4 years. I think it was popularized by TikTok, which you probably also don't know what that is.
I know what that is. I'm not 84.
So basically,
Wait.
Lingo.
What's TikTok? I need this thing explained to me.
Are you serious?
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right. I don't know what's real anymore.
I have
My
friends with
only
kids.
response
I
is
know
that
it.
I've been called a lot of things, but I've never been cool enough to have been called that.
Yeah, I mean, basically the stereotype is like they're always sad, and then they have a very specific aesthetic, which I don't know if I can really explain it to any degree of justice. They wear a lot of black. It's kind of like 90s
Does their hair
grunge
have a lot of
mixed with-
layers in it?
I don't think the hair.
I
don't think there's really a hair.
I'd say the
trend, is there?
hairstyle is pretty free form. It's usually pretty
Yeah.
casual from what I've seen.
It's more about clothing and attitude.
Oh, I know those. All right.
The question I kind of got out of this is the whole like, do you have a problem with goth aesthetic being blended into other cultural aesthetics or sometimes mainstream fashion? Does it make it harder to identify other people that are into your thing?
I mean, as far as the initial question being called an e-boy, I mean, when I first read that question, I had to look it up too. I was not familiar with the e-boy, e-girl phenomenon, mostly because while I know of TikTok, I don't really pay that much attention to it. But I mean, the idea, it's very similar to the Instagram goths and all the other sort of visual media based representations of the goth subculture, where usually the critique is about people who seem to just cultivate this persona that most people believe is totally dissociated from their real life. They don't do this in real life. They're not part of any real communities. They just put on this costume and put out content in TikTok or Instagram or wherever. And I think that's where the pejorative context of it comes from. And I'm sure some of them do that. It is just a costume that they get their audience for, and they get their likes and whatever they get from it. But I'm sure there are also some who are, involved in the lifestyle, invested in the lifestyle, and also want to have a TikTok presence and a Instagram presence and any of those sites. So I don't really have a strong judgment on the e-boy, e-girl. As far as your follow-up question regarding the mingling of Gothic aesthetic with other things, whether it's hip hop culture or mainstream culture or whatever, I'm actually usually pretty fond of it. I don't have any problem with the concept of having our subculture co-opted. I mean, I like the fact that I can go to regular shops and it's easier to find things that fit my aesthetic, and I can go and piecemeal and buy and, use that as parts for my own outfits. I think that's convenient.
Here's to that.
But beyond that, it's just, so what? I try not to run down the trap of, oh, you look like you're goth, so I'm going to assume you're goth, because that's used both positive and negatively. And yeah, is it frustrating that you're wandering around feeling lost and alone, and then you see somebody with the stereotypical Joy Division t-shirt and you have that little thrill of, ooh, a person that will understand me, and then you go up and they don't know what Joy Division is. I get the frustration around that, but by that same token, there are plenty of people who will rail against the opposite thing, where they get really pissed off when quote unquote normies see them looking weird and make all sorts of assumptions about them. So we're kind of doing the same thing where we assume other people. So I try to view people, I guess, in a more holistic way. And sure, the false positives of, hey, I see you over there, you look like you're interested in things I am, I talk with you, you're not. I don't get frustrated about that. I just move along. So I guess that's kind of my attitude towards all of that.
I think that's really healthy. Because
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Oh,
All
okay.
right.
Wow, we're like getting stuck in a doorway or something. So
That does not follow social distancing guidelines, so that's not going to fly.
At least we can do it verbally. So, I'll be frank, like, until you sent me that Reddit question, I was like, what the hell is that? So I kind of had to like do some like deductions and kind of, I guess my opinion follows Trey's quite a bit. So, so even though I haven't heard of this before, I kind of figured that it was referencing goth for fashion rather than goth for lifestyle. Goth for lifestyle and goth for fashion have amalgamated to something fairly unrecognizable presently, to the original meaning, and not necessarily in a positive way, just because of the interdependence of the internet on a mostly socially isolated or introverted subculture. There are gatekeepers and those like self-appointed to self-importance and like, sorry, kings and queens of wherever, but my ragged pirate ass bows to nobody. And maybe and maybe it's only to me, but it seems like they're the exact same people that we knew who were social gatekeepers in high school. So like, I'm kind of figuring like, even though like I'm not gonna like see somebody on the street that I'm going to just be like, yeah, you're tribally one of ours. For example, somebody wearing a t-shirt, like a punk rock t-shirt, but for a fashion statement, it's like, I mean, you just can't assume anything about anybody anymore, frankly. It's hard to.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to assume you're a guy. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What if you didn't feel like it anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all for using gender neutral pronouns for everyone until they tell you what their pronouns are. But I agree. I mean, I like to think that I'm pretty good at spotting, oh yeah, that person's definitely a goth, but I have certainly had instances where it's difficult to tell. I think especially with younger people who are trying on a bunch of different things. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And also, it doesn't really matter to me because who am I kidding? I'm not going to go talk to a random stranger on the street, even if they do look goth, because I'm a shy little person that doesn't want to talk to people.
That's fair.
So
you're not allowed to anyway. Not right now.
Yeah. Yeah, true. So I get the kind of bemoaning of the loss of really identifiable subcultural signifiers. But I think we have other ways of connecting with people that are part of our tribe now, going to clubs or online groups, that kind of thing. And I don't. I don't know if this is because I'm older now, but I feel like if someone, because I used to get the comment all the time of, "Oh, you look like Marilyn Manson,"
I think
which didn't
like
help
nobody
because I have
knows anybody else like as a household name for them right now. So you're gonna look like what they think that is.
Yeah. We also both have big noses, so that doesn't help.
Big noses
There's
are the
like,
best.
people like John and me, there's tall, skin. I'm not very tall, but skinny, big nose, tall goth guys all look the same. So it's a thing,
Right.
whatever. But like,
Roasted.
We're just a bunch of fucking goth toucans with big noses walking around. Yeah. Toucans without colors. Our shades are white, gray, and black.
Yeah. So I feel like if somebody called me an e-boy a long time ago, it probably would have bothered me because I would have been like, "No, I'm a goth. How dare you conflate me with this other thing that I'm not?"
You're
But
like, I'm an OG. Gee, fuck.
yeah, but these
can I
days,
swear
like,
on
I don't
Yes, you
care.
can swear.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So,
Oh,
say
okay,
whatever you
good,
want.
because I'm from Chicago and I can't talk without doing it.
Public broadcast television.
I don't know. Maybe Link's awake.
He is, but that doesn't change how I speak anyway. So
Oh, okay, good.
I don't know if I told
Link
this story
runs around
before,
the house
but
with
he's
butt plugs, so
yeah, that's the story I was going to tell. Thanks for.
That's the story.
Yeah, he found one of my butt plugs once and thought it was hilarious to run around and like stick it on the walls while I was frantically chasing him and telling him not to touch that. Yeah, it was actually pretty
Plugs
funny.
have multiple uses. Stick them up your ass
Yeah.
and they're children's toys.
Yeah, just sanitize it, please, for God's sake. Yeah, I don't remember what else I was going to say about that, so let's just do the next one. It's funny too because Link, at least right now, he somehow got. I think it might have been my mother-in-law, but for some reason he won't swear and he doesn't. He still refers to those as bad words, and I'm of the mindset of like. They're not bad words. It just depends how you use them. If you're using them to hurt somebody, then yeah, sure. But just the word itself isn't bad. You could say "fuck," I don't care.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty
yeah,
smart.
it's like the people who use alternates, the gosh darn it or cheese and rice and all that as euphemisms, but they're actually saying the bad word because the context is still there, the meaning is still there, and everybody knows what you're saying. The fact that
Yeah.
you didn't use the exact phonemes that make this forbidden word doesn't change the fact that you just swore.
Oh, I like forbidden things anyways.
Okay, so music taste. This person says, "Am I still goth if I don't like Susie Sue, Peter Murphy, and the like? I listened to their music and their songs weren't bad, but for the most part, it was way too soft for me. I really like intense metal rock music, but I would like to consider myself goth. I know the first and foremost that goth is a music genre, and that's what ties it all together. So I'm concerned that the fact that I don't like these types of bands makes me less of a goth or not a goth at all. Would I still be considered goth if I don't like this type of music, or would I be a different category of goth or something else? I'm a newbie to the scene in general, so please excuse me if this is a dumb question." Well, let's keep this order up. This
Sure.
works. Trey,
Yeah,
what do
yeah,
you
yeah.
what do you think?
Well, I mean, we've definitely run this particular question kind of into the ground on the podcast in general.
Rude, first of all.
Well, truth hurts, right? As far
as our Queen Lizzo would say.
as far as the answer to this question is concerned, I mean, my question is always going to be, well, one, why do you care whether you're a goth or not? Why is that important to you to be a goth? What aspect of goth draws you to it?
That's
that makes
such
you...
a new 21-year-old concern, though.
It is. But why did they choose goth as their subculture of focus?
And then they got to strictly
other
adhere to
things.
this.
Right.
Yeah.
So why are you having this crisis of conscience because you've decided you're going to be goth, yet when you start trying to get into the things that are theoretically what goths like, you find you don't like them? I mean, sure, maybe you don't know of anything else. So you're like, well, I mean, this seemed to fit and I like black. So I don't know of anything else. I guess I'll just jump into this and try it. So there's that aspect of it. And that's always my question when somebody is like, well, I want to be goth, but I don't like X, Y, and Z. And my question is always, well, why do you want to be goth? Not that I think they can't be goth, but I want to have that conversation. I want to know, what is it about goth that draws them to them and draws them to it and makes them want to inhabit that subculture if they're not liking these elements of it. As far as not liking the music, again, we've discussed this. There's a huge variety of music that falls under the goth umbrella.
So big.
And
it's so much.
Some of it's considered goth, some of it's considered goth adjacent, but there's plenty of harder stuff. If he doesn't like Susie, he doesn't like Peter, that's fine. Maybe she likes something along the lines of, UK Decay or Christian Death, or, go down the death rock side of things, which is a little bit harder. You can start edging
death
into...
rock is a form of goth, though.
It is.
It is. Hella form of goth.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely taking a core one. And then I was going to say you can sort of get towards the fringes as you start moving into the gothic metal, which is outside of the goth genre. But there's a spectrum leading from goth rock to that gothic metal, and there are harder and harder styles of music that would still be considered under the gothic umbrella that might, appeal to someone in the more metal camp, or even go down the industrial camp too. That's considered goth adjacent, and we certainly inhabit the same spaces as far as club spaces. And that's a much harder post-punk derived subgenre, even though it's not considered goth. It's certainly goth friendly. And maybe they're...
Have you guys heard of the brand new music taste, though? I don't know how brand new it is. Okay, sorry. I might be dating myself, but have you guys checked out Gothabilly yet?
Oh, I love Gothabilly.
Because that shit is tight, I gotta say.
Oh, no, I'm a huge fan of Gothabilly. I mean, I've always liked rockabilly in general. But Gothabilly, I like Gothabilly better than Psychobilly. Psychobilly's fine, but I'm not as much of a punk fan.
Fair.
So I tend to like the more Gothabilly styles. Anything with a nice double bass is all good on my book.
Yeah, I really, yeah. I mean, I think it was, I think Liars Club. I mean, before all this quarantine stuff happened, Liars Club was really Joe Vortek put on a good Gothabilly night, surprisingly. Huh? No offense, Joe. No, I just didn't see it happening. But yeah, no, it was kind of not my first introduction, but it's the only it was the only Gothabilly event I knew of in Chicago. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
not to interrupt you, Trey. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I mean, I pretty much said what I wanted to say. I addressed the, why are you goth, and then also addressed that, goth music. The umbrella is bigger than just Susie and Peter.
Hell yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I feel like musicality, even though it resonates with a subculture, you need to recognize your own truth. Like, no human being falls into a box perfectly, and subcultures have an ill-defined line of what it is and what it isn't belonging to them. And even then, when trends evolve, these lines can shift. So it's like harder goth music, we've industrialized metal, rock and roll, gothabilly, 80s fiend, death rock. Like, I personally have a really diverse palette myself. John just stepped up for a cigarette, unfortunately, so he can't really interject here, but as a musician, I do believe in order for art to evolve, we have to be more acceptant of different flavors, even if things we don't really like sometimes, in order for our music to not become stagnant. And, I fear, I don't want to say the word fear, that's not really true. I dislike the idea of being stuck as like the idea of an elder goth, like at some point in my life, to the point where it's like, well, I remember when this was good and this is the only good thing. And it's like, that's not true.
Yeah.
Like, there's plenty of new wonderful things coming out every day. And that's really encouraging.
Yeah, I'm along that same line where, as far as music taste is concerned, I'm all over the place. And I mean, I've expressed this on multiple music reviews too. When the music review is too, oh, this is totally 100% goth, I'm like, heard it, been there, done that. I've got other bands that I like that I've already heard that are doing the same thing. I'm not interested.
And it doesn't make it bad.
It's not. It's just
like,
Yeah, it's just not as interesting.
You want to try the
me.
buffet.
It's like, I'll say, yep,
yeah,
you did a really great job of being a by the numbers goth band. You're doing all the things right. It's great melodies, great lyrics. It's all there. I'm just not interested in that. I want something that shakes it up. I want something that surprises me. And frankly, some of my favorite music is stuff like Mr. Bungle that changes genres every 5 seconds.
Oh, Mr. Bungle. Yes.
So, I mean, I am very restless when it comes to music genre and variety. I love stuff that just bounces all over the place and just throws you to a loop anytime it can.
It can surprise you, the things that can be incredibly goth, like Egyptian music, even just world music.
Oh, I listen
like
to tons of world music.
Yeah, like dark and dusty, and just it has like the resonance of like something that's been made in like 5 centuries ago. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a reason I'm mad that the Dead Can Dance concert was postponed.
Exactly.
So what's your answer to the question, Count?
Yeah, so I agree with everything both of you said. I think I tried to make some music suggestions that would be helpful for this person. So my first thought was kind of going off what you said, Trey, with death rock and that kind of thing. If they're into harder music, my suggestion was like maybe Fields of the Nephilim, maybe something like Christian Death or Annex or Nox Novacula. Those are a few different types of goth music, but in general, like if you're really into metal, there's not a ton of very heavy goth music. That's just not the style that they play.
I mean, they really try very hard, and I do know a couple of metal bands that were like hella goth, and they were trying so hard, but they never get lifted off the ground beyond a local level, which I think is a little sad. But I just think the audience for it is so niche that they struggle with that.
I think more in the 90s, there was more of a crossover with like, man, what were the goth metal bands? My mind is blanking, but there were a few of them that got some traction, but that ship has kind of sailed. I don't think goths like having an association with metal, partially because we get stereotyped together, and I think it's just like the metal scene is very different.
There's definitely a huge cultural difference.
Yeah.
I've really started to drift away from the metal scene, particularly because they've like adopted a lot of conservative ideals. Not that, that's, I don't know, whatever. I'm just going to come out and say it. It sucks. So like,
yeah.
I mean, and I'm not saying all of them did or that they're all terrible people now, because I had friends though that I had to give up in the metal scene because they all really thought that this was okay, and I kind of was like, okay, I'm going a little bit away from you guys now, and I could see goth wanting to get away from that too, and be more of like the powerhouse of change and progress and stuff like that. I mean, we're all about androgyny and androgynous appearances anyway, and I really appreciate that, because that's, as far as I've seen, accepted in very, very few other subcultures.
Yeah, I can say, as far as the metal scene and the conservative nature of it, there's definitely a lot more of a concept of purism with the certain genres, like, oh, it must be this way. Oh, that's not real metal. That's not real this or real that. There's a lot more of this sort of purity testing that happens in there, and that's something that,
name the bassist of this band. No, I don't want to.
Yes.
Stop.
Yeah, and I don't care. And that's something that is also getting into sexism too, because that's something that I think women get a lot more than men do in the metal scene, particularly, because you need to prove that you're a true metal fan, which is bullshit in general.
Female fronted, you have to fight for that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could give, as far as one of the bands that got me into goth, not a goth band, but when I mentioned to Moxie when I was working with her back in high school, and when she told me all these other bands to get into, I was listening to Nine Inch Nails and Typo Negative. And Typo Negative would be that sort of goth metal, in that goth metal crossover vein.
Oh yeah.
So that is certainly
that was a
something
good time for it too.
Yeah. So I mean, I was listening to Bloody Kisses, and that was sort of my gateway into discovering more of goth. But then there's also when I started getting into goth, Christian Death when they released the Iron Mask, which isn't necessarily a highly popular album of theirs, but it is Roz's Christian Death done really in a more metal style. It's some of those original, Frigative Theater, Cervix Couch, Death Wish, done with more of a metal stylistic feel than the originals on the original albums. And I thought that was a very interesting album. It was my first Christian Death album. It's no longer my favorite, but it definitely has that more aggressive bent. And then, looking at Skinny Puppy, if you want to go the crossover between goth and industrial, again, more harsh, but having some goth elements in it as well. So a lot of those are the edge cases, questionable about being included in the goth umbrella, but are a way to bring you in, because sometimes you have to go to those edge cases if you're coming in from an outside subculture.
The gateway band, if you will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You go to those edge cases and then you work your way in. And as you listen, you can develop more of an appreciation for the other bands. Do you develop a love for them? Maybe, maybe not. But appreciating where they came from, how they influenced the bands you really love. I think that's a great learning experience and a great journey that almost everybody who is tangentially interested in music in general needs to take.
Across all boards, frankly. So I do see that as, like a necessary like history lesson if you're like really wanting to get into something.
I wanted to make like a couple suggestions for stuff people can do, because that's good theoretically. That's all sound advice. I wanted to try and give some more practical steps. So first I wanted to say, obviously what you were both saying, there's hundreds of bands out there with all different kinds of variations of sound. So you're bound to find something you like. But also, if you don't find something you like, it's fine. You don't have to be goth. And if you're not goth, you can still hang out with people that are goths. Like, it's not going to
nobody's
ruin
going to
your life.
excommunicate you. It's okay.
Yeah, you're fine.
But Daniel,
Go
I
ahead.
wanted to interject just one thing because it hadn't
Mhm.
been mentioned, and it's so
Okay.
freaking important. If you don't find in this country something that you like, look outside the box, literally. Go and listen to what Finland or what Germany or whatever,
Iran.
like even Russia or Japan has to offer as far as goth.
Russia's got some great stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. And I think it's important to like not just focus on things like here, maybe like the goth metal scene in Germany, as far as I know, it's flourishing comparatively speaking. So if you're into a different sound, you might not capture it in America. You may have to look beyond the boundaries that people have drawn for themselves here.
Yeah, mentioning Japan, look at Visual K.
Oh yeah. My
Again,
cousin's huge into
outside,
them.
not quite goth, not quite metal, but aesthetic is very goth. Sound is very metal.
Yeah.
It's definitely a borderline edge case that could certainly be in there.
I would say.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So,
Go ahead
yeah,
to your next
like,
question. Sorry.
No, that's good. I was going to say, check out websites that curate bands to find, to get an easier selection of stuff to listen to. Postpunk.com or Obscura Undead. You can also follow record labels on Bandcamp, which is what I do. Manic Depression Records, Swiss Dark Nights, Avant Records are a few. And then check on Spotify, look for playlists, and just kind of skim through those. I think a lot of times people start with the 80s bands like Bauhaus and Susie Sue and that kind of stuff, but that may not be a sound that resonates for you. Yeah. So my suggestions, usually I go with listen to The Demonstration by Drab Majesty, listen to The Gallows by Pawns, listen to Cineromance by CeeLo Fan, and then listen to Endgame 69 by The Devil in the Universe, because those are four very distinct sounds. And then if you like any of those, you can move on to similar bands. So She Passed Away, Only Lovers and Giants, Otzi, Helium Volo, that kind of stuff. But I think the best way to do that is to find someone in the scene that is willing to say, okay, what bands do you like? Here's a few suggestions. What did you think of those? Okay, here's a few other suggestions. What did you think of those? I think that's usually the best way to do it.
Finding a mentor, finding a guide is key. but one that's open-minded. That's the hardest part.
Yeah,
I think.
and there's a question. There's a
that's where the
question about
issue
that
is.
coming up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's do the stereotypes one real quick. Well, actually, I'm just going to skip that because we're running kind of long, and I think that question.
Sorry.
Unless you guys wanted to really talk about that.
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
I've got examples, but I was like stretching. So
I
I
didn't really
was
have
kind of
any.
like, I'm the only person smiling in a goth night picture. I'm not depressed, nor do I have anxiety. I'm just loud as hell and probably belligerent.
Yeah.
That's it.
I guess I'll share that as a tangent. Is that one of my examples is along those lines. I went to a convergence way back when in New Orleans. It was one of the first convergence I went to,
Oh, that sounds fun.
and every convergence does a masquerade.
Oh, I want to go.
So everybody wears a mask, and so I went
Nola.
with a comedy mask. And what I loved, and maybe I was projecting, but wandering around the club with my comedy mask, looking at people looking at me, seeing them smile and then suppress. So that was amusing me over the course of that time. But it's always been sort of my thing. I like to kind of stick people's stereotypes back at them. So when I was going to goth clubs back in Champaign, I was known
Champaign
for
has goth clubs?
It did when I was in college back in the 90s. It actually still has a flagging scene, but it waxes and wanes. It's a college town. That's how they go.
I was gonna say my sister went there in like the 2000s, and I went down there and I was like, there were just bros and hoes everywhere, and I would have been shocked if there was anything cool like that down there.
Yeah, there was a major club night from throughout the 90s pretty much, and I was there from 95 to about 2002 ish. That was my college and post-college years. So the major goth club down there was C Street, was a gay club, as a lot of goth clubs tend to be.
I like the irony of the name.
Yeah. But it was a Monday night thing. It had a lot of people come down from Chicago for it. I think Scary Lady Sarah debuted there a couple times too. So that was a pretty good club night that it waxed and waned. It's gone now. We've had a couple of revivals, but the original DJ no longer was doing it. So we had a couple other clubs. I was part of a club that we started, and one of the main DJs for a few years while I was down there as well. So we've had a couple, but since I've left, it's gone down, it's come back up, it's gone down, it's come back up. I do have a lot of friends still in the area, and there are still events that happen down there, but there's not so much that I can think of right now, a regular goth club night. But where I was going to was with C Street. One thing that I did, it was the only one that did, but I would come to the club head to toe white, just cause. No, it was usually like poet shirt. Yeah, it was poet shirt and top hat, so it had the aesthetic appeal.
Right.
But it was pure white, white shoes, white pants, socks, hat, gloves sometimes, but head to toe white, just to be different, just to kind of stand out. And I found it fun, and I got, well known for that. So I just kind of like doing that. I like seeing stereotypes, understanding stereotypes, and breaking them consciously, just for fun.
Yeah.
You should.
So the question is, tell me the craziest thing you've DIY'd that you didn't have the money to buy, or just didn't want to give money to a corporation for something lots of people can buy.
Okay,
so if we're going in the standard order, I'm going to say I'm boring, so I'm not going to have much to say here. I'm not really much of a DIYer. I'm more of a piecemeal kind of person. I will buy bits and pieces from various shops and just put them together in combinations. So that's my DIY. I am not by nature a crafty person. I played with jewelry making for a little bit and made a couple of hand flowers, but never got into anything major. So unfortunately, I'm not a poster child for goth DIY, but I love it and respect those who do.
Okay. So I have a BFA, and I'm Polish, and I'm Asian. So my entire existence is DIY. Like everything that I do. So I know my people, and we are a cheap people. And for every performance that I've ever had, I've made every article that I was wearing on stage, like minus a headdress with like humongous horns on them, which I actually employed Jeanette Rogers.
I was going to say Jeanette
Ward.
definitely does those. Yeah, Jeanette definitely does the headdress as well.
Yeah, and I'm actually a co-owner, CEO of Antibiotics Productions LLC. So we have we've had like Goth Christmas productions, like specifically Krampus based productions.
Wow.
In like the theaters and stuff, like the Den Theater, like our shit gets sold out. It's awesome. I get super excited about it because people are like, well, all the performers, we don't get Halloween, so we can like, how about a Christmas Halloween? So we do that and we like amalgamate that. Still, like the craziest, I guess it really depends what show I've done. So I've done an articulated set of gigantic light up bat wings,
Wow.
a horned helmet, a mask that cries blood, latex eye applications, stilts that have fur covering and hooves on them, a sword that can conflagrate. So that means the sword literally goes up in flames.
Yep.
So I wrote this down here, which is like a little embarrassing, but it's also true. So it says, out of all the crazy shit I made, though, so like you just heard some of the craziest shit, the stupidest was one that was the most celebrated in pictures. And it was an outfit to impress a boy I liked back in the day. So I was just like, ew, like, why? And I guess most recently, I had a stage partner who built a suit that he could be beheaded by my sword and spray the audience with blood. And that was an absolute blast, covering the audience at a well-to-do fancy pub in blood. That was very fun. I was at first really worried that everybody would be really mad at me, but apparently, since I told them ahead of time, the bar staff bought ponchos for the guests at the bar so that we could make it rain, like literally rain blood in that venue, and that was freaking awesome.
I love it.
Yeah. So
yeah, that actually made me think, have you performed with Rock's Geek at all?
I have not. That is something that I've wanted to do, but we've hired each other for like various different performances, but haven't really crossed that path yet. I think we should eventually.
Yeah, because I know they do a really good fire show every once in a while.
They do. And the fire people that I normally work with are Phantasmagoria girls like Lennox and Jezebel, and we're mostly sideshow. Since I've moved away from belly dance a little bit, which isn't to say that I don't love it. It's still in my heart, but like,
we all move on.
I'd like to play with them again. If they'd have me, I would do it.
Yeah, Count, I need to take you and Sarah to one of their shows, I think, because you'd love the geek aspects of it.
Yeah, I had so much fun with those.
I think you'd both enjoy the belly dancing Wookiee.
Who doesn't? Like, that is such a dope costume. It must have taken hours to make. Yeah. Weeks, even.
Yeah, I can sew patches and stuff, but that's about it. So I don't have any interesting things to say about that, so I'll just move on. Okay. I really respect your amazing skills. I've seen some of the stuff you put together, and it's incredible. So
you can't buy that from a store. You literally have to like put your nose to the grind. Well, the girls in the business say you got to put your nose to the rhinestone, and so we do, and it's rough. Yeah. I haven't made up a goth saying for that yet, so.
Don't sell yourself too short, Count. You definitely put together a pretty mean trad goth jacket. Sure, it's just sewing patches, but there's a lot of work that goes into that, and I think you do a really good job with them.
I'd agree with that.
Well, I appreciate that, because I don't think they're very good, but I appreciate that.
You can't buy that in a store either. Yeah.
That's true. Although I have seen some like
trashy knockoffs, sure.
People selling them on Etsy. Which is it's a punk jacket. You made a punk jacket. You're selling it for $250 on Etsy. Doesn't Doesn't that seem a little ironic? All right, whatever.
It does. But I mean, hey, if you're like a server and all you do when you get home
Yeah,
is like
that's true.
fall on your face and sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you deserve something nice.
All right, so the next question is titled "How much goth an artist must be to be called goth?" is where I'm going with this. So they wrote, I know it seems like a dumb question, but hear me out. If an artist of a different genre releases a goth album, does it make them part of the scene? Does history matter? For example, G-O-S-T, Ghost, I don't know who this band is. They
Synthwave,
are...
and it's probably
that's
Ghost,
my
would be my
brother's
guess.
band.
Ghost?
Who's
Okay.
into it.
Oh, okay. Well, because Ghost is also a metal band.
Yes,
Nah,
but they spell it.
This is a different
Differently.
band.
This is
Yeah.
a different. He's like Ghost.
Ghost.
With drama.
Sure, we'll go with that.
I mean, you'd have to ask the band
John
members
shaking
of the
his head.
music we're
Calling
reviewing this month, and they probably know Ghost because they definitely have some influence. They definitely have some crossover with synthwave.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Yeah. So they say, but the latest album, Valedictorian, is definitely a dark wave album. Sometimes it sounds like a heavier version of The Cure. So it's okay to say Ghost is goth. Is it okay to say they're goth, or all of his career should be taken in consideration?
So I think I've mentioned this before, but I think calling any artist in totality a thing is stupid.
Yeah, it boxes
If-
him in
if-
a lot.
Yeah, if an entire band can be classified 100% as goth, they probably aren't doing a lot of interesting and experimental things. They're just picking a subgenre and running with it. And that's partly why a lot of the quote-unquote classic goth fathers are so annoyed when they've been pigeonholed into it, because they didn't choose that, they didn't pick it, and they want to be able to do other things with their style, but now they've been pigeonholed in this, and if they don't toe the line, their fans get all uppity about it. But I mean, we already said in this album review, sometimes sounds like a heavier version of The Cure. The Cure is not a goth band in their entire work.
Yeah.
They have
No.
plenty of goth songs. They have maybe some goth albums, but not every one of their songs is goth by any stretch of the imagination.
They're kind of
So-
a Noel Felding in the music world, and I guess, in my humble opinion.
I'm
Okay.
actually curious. I'll want you to elaborate on that in a minute here, because I know
Another
Noel Fielding, but
lanky, beak-nosed, pale... yeah, sorry.
True.
Actually, that's kind of
but
where
yeah,
I was going with it.
That's fair. That's fair.
With some fringed
So I'm just-
bangs.
I'm just thinking that, a lot of the bands that I really love, I can say they might have a goth song, a goth album at most, or a couple, but their entire catalog has stuff that branches out into other things, experiments with other things, touches on other things, and I think that's what makes good bands. So if a band that isn't goth makes a goth song, it's a goth song. If it's a goth song, I mean, if goth is a thing that can be musicologically defined, if goth is a thing that can be musicologically defined as a certain sound, aesthetic, and a band that is not goth makes a song that does that, why is it not a goth song?
I
I'll
just
wait my
heard
turn.
fighting ooze, and I'm like
I'm gonna
did
wait-
too.
I'll wait
curious
my
about
turn.
this.
I'll wait my turn. Actually, well, I'll wait my turn. So, Lady India, if you want to throw in your thoughts, and actually, I think John would probably have something to say about this, but I don't know if he wants to.
John,
Should
if you
chime in, but-
John's sitting across the room listening too, because he can hear. Okay, probably isn't a question that should be fielded to me. Because I feel like I'm a little out of my depth. I just said I enjoy both synthwave and dark wave, and personally, I feel synthwave is goth subtype anyway. If you look at the history of it in the 80s, anyway, I wouldn't know if releasing a darker album makes the artist a part of the scene so much as successfully having reached an audience using the audience's own material. So by that logic, I feel as though it's okay to include that material into your playlists. It doesn't necessarily mean, I don't know, like who doesn't have like a little bit of Diane word or some other thing, or used to, excuse me.
I mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I
mean,
have it.
I
I've
did
listened
correct
to it. I
myself,
don't
okay.
respect the artist. Yeah, I mean, I've listened to Deont Wood. I've liked Deont Wood. I don't respect the artists. I don't want to support them, but
Right.
I think their music
like
is still
I said,
interesting.
There was a blow up, but it wasn't always. It didn't always exist. That blow up didn't always exist.
Yeah,
So back in the day, like that was just like. But would you call them goth? I don't really know. Like, would
Absolutely not.
you know what I'm saying?
You can call them creepy without being called goth. I think a lot of people use certain bands and artists that have sort of a creepy imagery to them, and they refer to them as goth because there's nothing else to refer to them as.
Yeah.
Marilyn Manson.
Exactly. I feel like it falls into that category. It's like, ooh, you got some weird blood dripping out of your mouth, black and white footage. You must be goth. You're like, no, that's just the video aspect of it.
So I want to, before I kind of tell you why I think I disagree, I basically, like, I'm also kind of out of my depth because I don't read a lot of musicological literature, but I pulled two different quotes that break down goth music in that field. So if you will both bear with me, I'll read these real quick to give kind of a informed opinion about how you define, like, how experts define goth music.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is from a wiki page, and the second one is from a thesis on goth. So the first quote is, in goth, the guitar tone is usually processed with electronic effects. A clean or warmly overdriven guitar sound is processed through chorusing, flanging, analog delay, and or dense reverb, resulting in a timbre that resembles those used by Bauhaus, Susie and the Banshees, and The Cure. As well, goth has a characteristic guitar playing style. Goth guitar playing takes its downstroke from the playing style of punk and emphasizes angular melodic lines instead of thick chords. Minor keys and minor mode melodies are prevalent, but major keys are also used to scale degree with a flattened second scale degree, which contributes to the goth sound with its haunting and spooky mood. Goth songs are typically mixed so that there is a heavy bass sound, which creates a dark and shadowy atmosphere. Goth often uses repetitive snare drum snap to propel the beat, either a real drum beat or later on usually a drum machine beat. The metronomic snare drum sound can be first heard in Iggy Pop's The Idiot. It continues on in Joy Division songs, Gary Numan's early music, and early Cure CDs. More sophisticated variations of the snare drum snap are used by Kevin Haskins in Bauhaus's music. So that all sounds right to me. And then the second little quote I pulled out is from, I have the name of the book, The Music of Goth Subculture, Postmodernism, and Aesthetics. So this person says goth music
title.
is most...
It's a mouthful.
Yeah. It's a PhD thesis that he turned into a book. So
okay, I gotcha.
That's how those academic books basically are all titled.
I was going to say, I mean, it's like downpicking. I'm like, it's angrier.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, when I describe what goth music is, it's very much about how it makes me feel because I don't play instruments, so I don't know any of these technical, delineations between stuff.
That's more of a John expertise thing. Right
Exactly.
there.
That's yeah. John, you can play my guitar anytime. It's my penis. So this says
that's a skin flute, not a guitar.
Yeah. Well, it depends how you use it.
How many strings does your penis have?
At least 4.
Then you're a
So
bass.
it's more of a
That's
bass.
ukulele, man.
That's just cruel.
So you've seen it, is what I'm getting out of that. You've seen it. So this says, goth music is most frequently described by fans and musicians themselves as atmospheric, moody, or ambient, and the guitar plays a major role in creating this effect. Musicians in this genre had nothing but disdain for guitar heroes like Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page. For them, creating an accompaniment that conveyed the mood of the text was the most important, or creating such an evocative atmosphere that it inspired a text. Guitar players for goth bands were always very sensitive to the colors of different chord voicings and keys on the guitar. They often use extended techniques and controlled feedback to mimic the jarring effects created by an orchestra in horror film soundtracks. This could include everything from the extreme manipulation of the tremolo bar to strumming the strings behind the nut or playing the guitar with a bow, which Dan Ash of Bauhaus was particularly adept at. Does that check out, John? I don't know what a guitar nut even is, so...
I wouldn't call Eric Clapton a guitar hero by any means.
He was way back in the day, way back in the 70s. He was definitely one of the major guitar, epitomes of guitar virtuosity. But yeah, as he grew into his older age and went into the 80s and 90s, he became more of a smooth adult contemporary rocker.
But I do also believe it's the way that you play your instrument, whether you're in a band or you're a solo artist, whatever music you're making. What defines whatever it be, like goth rock or goth music. It's the way you play it. So you can be a guitar hero, you could be a whiz at any instrument, but it also depends on the style you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the guitar hero thing was more about there's not a lot of showboating solos in goth music. Yeah. The guitar plays a supplemental role rather than a lead starring role.
Yeah. Well, but also goth, it's a lot more melodic too. It's not so choppy. Where you think of like rock music where you do get that starring role. It's usually, you got the basic, intro, verse, chorus, break, chorus, or things like that. You don't get that in goth music because it's more about like just the ambient in the song.
Yeah, and I think a part of and maybe I'm taking you out of context here, but I think part of what you said is why I may disagree with you, Trey, because I feel like you can have a musicological definition. I mean, I would say that's something that may change over time. I don't think that dissuades maybe defining what a goth song is through musicology. But I feel like with goth, just as goth is multifaceted, so too is the music, and things like how you play it, the performance, the aesthetic of the musician, their own sort of opinions on whether on goth itself, whether they want to be associated with it or not, and also the opinion of the person listening are all aspects of it. So I think that there is, well, despite what Reddit posters may say, I think there is always going to be an element of subjectivity to that question, and you can't necessarily write out like a mathematical formula for this. If all of these are checked, then this is a goth band or this is a goth song. I think there are other elements at play besides the sound, besides the lyric and the feeling, and there's the performance and the person themselves. And where they fit within the sort of pantheon of bands at the moment and that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think our main distinction is actually one of the, major points of contention or debate within a lot of just general art theory and art criticism, art history and whatever. Sure, yeah. The idea that, does the work stand on its own, or is it important to take the work in the context of the author's life and other works and all that? Do you appreciate a work of art as its own thing, or should you know the history of the artist, what they're into, what other things they did, and should that inform your appreciation of a piece of art? And I tend to fall more along the lines of the camp that I'm more interested in the art itself and the conversation that I, as an individual, am having with that piece of art and how it makes me feel and how I'm responding to it. And that's where I view the magic of art to be, is my personal experience, that collaboration of the appreciator and the art itself is what I view as valuable. I don't go so far down that camp as to totally discount the artist. I like to have that impression of the art first off, but then I like to learn about the artist and learn about what led to this art and maybe how other works of arts interact with that. But I do like to
So
view an artistic endeavor as a standalone object as well.
yeah, I mean, I would agree with you in the sense of how I want to appreciate art. However, I think when you're asking this question, which is, I feel like a broader, more sociocultural question that implicitly brings in questions of the, you know, community acceptance and evolution of subculture over time and that kind of thing. I think that is when you get into the aspect where context does matter to answer that question, because the music itself doesn't exist in a vacuum that doesn't interact with anything, and it doesn't exist in I'm sitting in my room listening to music having an experience, because you're asking the question of, is it goth? And goth is broader than just me sitting at my computer, you know?
Sure. Now, as just a general question, is there an aspect of that that goes down towards appropriation discussions, where if you have someone who's not goth, makes no claim of being in the gothic subculture, but chooses to put out a piece of art that is goth, is there an impression then that because they weren't part of the community, weren't part of the scene, that they are trying to co-opt aspects of the sound in a, I guess, in a, you know, cultural appropriation way? Is that an element of the aversion to that idea?
Well, I wouldn't use the word, I wouldn't necessarily use that phrase, because for me, cultural appropriation is a very specific thing.
It is, and by the way, it does. I'm so sorry to interject here, but there's that question, feeling depressed about who I am. There's a mixed race girl in here talking about that, and I was just thinking to myself, like, that is a legitimate segue, in a sense, where I'm like, yeah, it's anyway. Daniel, go ahead. I do agree with you that it is maybe not the right phrase.
Yeah, we can jump to that question next. For me, though, yeah, when I think of cultural appropriation, it's more of you have a dominant group that's been in power and has oppressed a minority group, and are using symbology and practices from that group without concern for where that came from or what damage they're doing to it. And I think that term for me is very specifically wrapped up in like imperialism and colonialism. Whereas if you're talking about music groups borrowing or using sounds from other genres, I don't think it makes it to that level. But it is the question itself, I think, is still valid of, if a band that is not goth and has not made goth music makes a song that sounds like a Sisters of Mercy song, is it a goth song? I would still say no, because I think we have a lot of bands that are on the indie side of things that goths like to listen to that sound very similar. I think the album we're going to review actually like you said, is a great example, because I talked to the person who made the album, and he said that he does not consider himself a goth, but does appreciate that scene and has some friends, like he's friends with Andy Harriman. So I think within that context, I would say personally, it is not a goth album, but I do think goths can enjoy it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it does get kind of muddy, and it is difficult, right? Because then you have, you know, the whole Andrew Eldritch thing, and that goes kind of down a rabbit hole. But
Right. Well, I mean, you basically got people who get angry in both directions.
yeah.
So the people who make a goth song and get angry that they're not being appreciated as a goth song, whatever. But then the people who make these classic, great goth anthems, but bristle every time they're lumped into goth, like Andy, Peter, etc.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to some other stuff. So where was that question? What was that? So this person says, mixed race, making the decision to finally be externally goth. I know the style of clothing I like, and I know what would look best on me. But when it comes to makeup, everything crumbles. I don't know who I am when I do makeup. I don't know what I want, and every time I try something, I feel like a toddler just did finger painting. My dad is my biggest ally. He helped me go
That's
to the
so
bookstore. Yeah, helped me go to the bookstore and pick out foundations and eyeshadow, etc. I was real excited to work with it, but the moment I finished, I was just so disappointed. I feel like I doubt my face is meant to be goth, and sometimes I doubt my skin tone is either. I see a lot of black ladies pull it off, but for some reason, being in between has been super difficult for me just to find the right makeup. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so in this one she's just like, I'm from Georgia. I'm a mixed race, black and white woman, and I just kind of I can kind of relate. I mean, I know that I'm a paler skin, so it's not the same struggle exactly, but I can relate to this being mixed race myself. Like for example, I can't really dye my hair black because I really wouldn't be goth. I would be traditional Asian if I did that. I'd just be another Asian chick. Like who cares?
Hmm.
So at first knowing that was kind of disappointing, but the devil is in the details for that. And I think that because it's such an inclusive subculture, that it's important to kind of like embrace who you are when you're trying to embrace the look itself. So if you're wearing your hair natural like a black person would, like a natural black style like dreads or an afro, they could experiment with like hair jewelry that speaks to them. Or if you're talking about makeup, it takes a lot of practice and smart to go with good brands first. If you're a dark skinned mixed person like my brother, he pulls off like golden metallics really well, and it looks absolutely stunning on dark skin, and it highlights what you're trying to do with black eyeliner or black lipstick, which is kind of like, maybe I would say, a social normative of the appearance. And I've also seen stunning results with some of my black friends pulling off like white tribal designs to stark contrast, for a very mysterious witchy vibe, or the Cleopatra look for others who feel like a little more svelte and maybe more worldly. I like honing in. I feel like honing in on what feels inherently you will be the first part of the journey and direct you to what colors somebody will need, what tools they will need for their style. And after that, it's just YouTube and practice. Dark skin and, the goth aesthetic is stunning when you nail down the look you're after. So the common images can be really discouraging that are representative, of what gossip culture is. But I think it's encouraging to like know, yeah, it's 2020. It's time to take a different inward look at what a flattering outcome could possibly be.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, goth does not have a skin tone, and if you can't, makeup is hard. I mean, for me, like me and my wife, like makeup has always been hard, and I think part of it is I just don't have the time to experiment with it. But if you can, you make a look your own, and I think that individuality and that unique flavor is actually a benefit in goth, and being able to
is.
not just looking like, not to offend anyone, but not looking like the 500th Susie Sue that has walked into the club is a good thing.
Exactly.
So,
The
yeah.
cookie cutter replacement girlfriend.
Yeah. Please don't at me on Twitter. All right, so let's do one more, and then
Let me chime in
yeah.
real quick on this one first before we move on. So I don't necessarily have a lot of opinions on the makeup side of things because I've never really been big on the makeup side. I just, I do more of the outfit and then demeanor than the makeup. But how I've always looked at it, and why I've not, or why I've always been confused about these whole goth is white skin, whatever the skin tone thing is.
Milk white neck.
People, yes. But
is that a Blue Dangle song? That sounds like a Blue Dangle song.
The devil's mark. Sorry, it's like a whole drinking a milk thing.
Uh-huh.
Go on. I'm
No,
so sorry, Trey.
That was typo negative.
Yes, it was.
Same difference.
Yeah, black number one. So how I usually think about it and how I do it is it's not about the specific look. It's not about having white skin. It's not about having, these specific colors, these specific looks. The purpose of the makeup and the aesthetic of goth is about a why. Why do goths have the white skin? Why do they have these designs on their face or these colors of makeup? What is the underlying meaning? And I think in goth, there is an underlying meaning about that. There's the sort of idea of death, the idea of agelessness. And you know what? All races, all skin colors die. They don't go white like Western Europeans do, but they would all have some sort of a pallor that gives you that sensation of either being dead or being beyond the grave. And I think that's the aesthetic that a lot of goth looks, as far as especially the makeup, is going for. So lean into that. If you have darker skin, what does it look like when someone with your skin tone is laid out in after the mortician gets them painted up for the funeral? And take that as your inspiration rather than just trying to look like what the Swedish person does when they're dead.
Right. Or like if you, and I'm sorry to reference this again, the Queen of the Damned, for example, like Aaliyah really kind of brought to the table what, like a person of color could look at and kind of just be like, oh, that's me in that position, that I can relate to this. These are colors that I can use. This is a look that I can facilitate for myself, or at least maybe even a spin-off of it. I don't think that's wrong to say. I think, she actually absolutely played an undead character, but also played very much a lively antagonist as well when she wasn't pulling off the aesthetic with that ethical ideal behind it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I just think understanding the reason behind the aesthetic is important to discovering how you can make it apply to you, rather than just looking at the visual. Oh, here's an Instagram picture. Let me see if I can duplicate that. When it's not at all a reflection of you and your experience with this subculture and with this aesthetic.
The only thing I've learned, basically the only thing I've learned conceptually from makeup videos is that, and like pro makeup artists, is that
contour.
No, not even necessarily, but that
yeah, though.
your skin type and your bone structure and your blemishes and your everything is going to be different for everybody, and you're going to have to individualize it and kind of figure out what works for you, and it's just kind of a process to do that.
Yeah, the most effective makeup is working with, enhancing, and playing with what's already there. It's not plastic surgery.
Yeah.
It's not trying to totally reshape your appearance. I mean, sure, special effects makeup, that's its own thing.
Embracing who you are, like, physically too, in a big sense, even though people are trying to like convince you that you're altering your appearance, and you are, and that's fine, but I'm just saying, like, you're also working with what you have to make that aesthetically pleasing for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't hold to any essentialist notions of some appeal to naturalism where this is your body and anything you do to it is wrong somehow because it's not natural. I think that's total bullshit. So
nope, it's your body. Do what you want.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to see people who enjoy their body and appreciate their body for what it is and don't get all hung up on trying to mold it into some unrealistic ideal. But that doesn't mean that all sculpting of your own body is forbidden. I want people to have a healthy relationship with their body, appreciate it, but play with it. Do what you want to do. Have the look you want to have.
And one day I'll be able to replace my ukulele with a tentacle. All right, so let's do one more question and then see how we're doing for time and what you guys want to do. So let's do the baby bat, how to avoid hate within the subculture one.
Oh,
if y'all can find that.
Yeah.
Do you have some feelings?
I have a lot of questions about that age gap.
Oh yeah, I wasn't even gonna touch that, but
That was the only thing dramatic about that question.
it makes me feel.
Yeah, I've had some age gaps in my life, but I've never done more than I think 12 or 13 years.
Dude, is that like over 20 years?
Yeah,
No, it's 26 years.
Dude, that's John, you hear that? That's just 1 year younger than you are.
He's dating more than two of the person he's
Fuck off
dating.
to me.
I don't really necessarily care. So the reason it feels icky to me is because I feel like there's this like patriarchal thing of men fetishizing really young women, and I think that's really gross.
Yeah. No, it totally is though. Like,
the main
and
thing
I
that
know
feels-
somebody like that who is my ex. That's why I'm like, huh? Are you
Yeah.
married to my ex?
See, I don't mind the age differences as people get older,
Sure.
but when you're below your mid-20s, you get into
Yeah.
that sort of predatory area
Yeah.
because people
Yeah.
in their mid-20s and below are still developing socially, mentally,
And your
psychologically.
frontal cortex isn't even developed until you're 25. Thank you very much.
Yep, that's kind of the cutoff I was looking at.
Yeah, I mean, when
So-
you're older,
Guy
sorry.
that is in your 30s and has to go after the girl that like just turned 18, there's something wrong.
Yeah,
Right.
You can
It's
really
like you're just trying to find the person who's desperate at that point.
Yeah, you can
Well,
utilize
yeah,
life
because she'll be more
experiences.
impressed by your passport then, I suppose.
Mhm.
I don't know.
All right. So let's get
Okay,
to this
all
question.
right.
So I guess I'll keep that part in. I'm 21, very, very new to the subculture. I learned about bands like Depeche Mode, Nine Inch Nails, Sisters of Mercy through my husband, who is 47. I'm aware that the first two are not considered goth. Yeah, there's
There's the reaction.
I love listening, and man, I'm gonna get a lot of angry emails on this episode. I think I love listening and learning about new music, and it's been a lot of fun hearing newer and more different sounding types of music like Bauhaus and Susie and the Banshees. Man, I think, are we ever gonna reach a point like 40 years from now when we're not
Gonna label those
Bauhaus
two
and Susie and the
bands.
Banshees every single anyway.
I mean,
They're
at
going to be
least
rolling
it's,
in their grave before we take them off the roster, okay?
At least it's gender diversity.
Yeah, true. My husband grew up around this, although he doesn't identify. He doesn't personally identify as goth. He's been a great source of information. I've had a lot of issues just speaking generally to anyone online about what is or isn't considered goth music, and just trying to discover new music. I've been met with a lot of criticism because I'm fresh to the subculture and don't know as much. It's like I almost receive a reaction of disgust if I haven't heard a particular band before. I'm a literal baby in this, and I desperately want to learn more from the right people, but when I do come in contact with someone who is reacting negatively to me, how do I deal with it? How am I meant to react? I know a lot of people hate to use the terms elitist or gatekeeper, so I obviously steer away from those, but it genuinely hurts me when people react the way they do over my lack of knowledge on certain things. Am I being too dramatic? So, Trey, would you like to...
Yeah, I mean, I
Sound like you do now.
it's a hard question to answer
Yeah.
because I mean the thing is I want to say is, come to me, talk to me.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to talk to you, and there are a not insignificant number of people involved in the subculture at all different experience levels who hold that same opinion. Whether we're the majority or not is hard to say. We certainly don't seem to be the majority when it comes to, the common, how common this sort of reaction is, how common this sort of story is when someone comes in and has tales of gatekeeping, or people who, oh, you don't know this band, well, I'm not even going to talk to you. And that exists in goth, that exists in all subcultures. It's a thing. And I don't know if it's a young thing too, if it's the people who are
It is a bit of a
young
thing.
elder goth. I think it is too. I think people who are true elders. Well, actually, true elders can go in a couple different directions, but most
True
of them
that.
become a little bit more laid back and are more interested in bringing someone in like this and being patient with them and all that. But there are, of course, also those people who have just become old and curmudgeonly and just want to not talk to anybody, frankly. So they just use the gatekeeping stuff as a way to get rid of you, because really they don't care. They just don't want to talk to people. They just don't want to have their time wasted with this hand holding. And there's always going to be people like that. But I'd say, the best advice, just keep trying, keep being respectful. If someone is insulting to you, roll with it. Don't react back with that same sort of hostility. Don't yell at them for being elitist and gatekeeping, because that doesn't do anything. That just gets both of you more annoyed. It shuts down the conversation. Move on. There are other people with the online communities now. You're no longer restricted to the people in your local area, the people in your local club. You no longer have this very small pool to draw from. You've got a wide world out there. Ask some other people. Just don't. I mean, if you're truly passionate about it, if you're loving the music and you really want to learn more, just keep looking. I mean, I was lucky to find someone who was good at giving me a bunch of quick suggestions, just knowing a little bit about stuff that got me interested. But I built from there on my own, and we've got so many more resources now. If you find a couple bands you like, go to Wikipedia, look them up. Go to All Music Guide, go to some music review site, see who their influences were, see what their history was, and dig down that way too.
So, I actually don't think she's being dramatic by asking at all. I think if people are reacting with negative disgust, they are being dramatic, frankly. There is a psychological term called displacement. It works like this. These people have never gotten to be the cheerleader or football player whomever had social authority over them. And these people with social authority reacted to them with disgust. And now that they have social authority in something, they are reacting to that person in the way that they were treated. So frankly, that sort of behavior is kind of pathetic anyway. So maybe this sounds a little mean, but people who dress up really love to talk about themselves. I mean, they love it. So if you want to know what everyone else is listening to, I would just ask a question as though you were curious about them instead. It's Saturday. What's everyone's dark jam today? What's your favorite goth band and why? And you can go ahead and be observational about pecking orders before you jump into that fray. So I know that sounds horrible, but it's true for every scene. And if we dare to venture out, we may as well do it with caution, because it pays to look before you leap. So that's not to say worrying about who the right people are, or you can do that with observation if you want anyway. But when you begin to customize yourself to fit an ideal, you lose your own voice and you just become a sheep anyway. And that's kind of not the point of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think emphasizing the power of lurking is important.
Kind of, though. Seriously.
Yeah, lurk and learn. And then once you've got the measure of who is what type of person in a given community, whether it's online or in real space, go up to the ones who, seem to be more open to it. And if you just jump in there not knowing anybody with a question, you're going to get the people jumping down your throat, because there are enough people who just love doing that.
Yeah.
But if you lurk and learn, you'll have a better chance of being able to target it at the people, or understanding the general means of communication, how they carry a conversation within this community. And that's going to vary from community to community. You can't just say, goths are all like this. The goths of Reddit, are a goth, they're going to be like this. The goths of Instagram are going to be like this. The goths of YouTube are going to be like this. Goths at your local club are going to be, it's sort of a unique brand, and you got to get a feel for it before you can jump right in.
And it kind of like rolls over into the gatekeeping, like the gatekeeping question. So I think, we probably might be cutting that out anyway, but like to the extent of like gatekeeping to the extent of bullying is going to make a subculture die anyway. So if you want to help keep your subculture alive, you got to educate your babies. Not only do you become respected in your community for that, you become someone who can lend a word of wisdom to those who seek it. And so I just feel like it's valuable as keeping a few concrete concepts, but and music, of course, being one of them. But you just got to educate your babies at the end of the day, and if you want the subculture to continue.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I thought this was an interesting question, because we've kind of talked from the other direction about this, of like, how should goths who have been in the scene for a while react to somebody new, but I don't think we've really talked about how someone who's new should react to the actions of other people. And like you both said, it is hard because for me, like if I run into these people, I can just cut them out of my life, even if they're older than me and have been goth longer, because I don't need their validation anymore. And I have my own personal friend network that I can interact with. Like all three of you are here right now. But yeah, when you're new, whatever, I can't count. That's why I only have 3 friends. When you're
new, you have 3 friends anyway.
You're looking for acceptance. You're looking for validation. You're trying to connect with your tribe. So it is really hurtful when those interactions happen. Like you said, utilize your tools, try different social media platforms, lurk.
And be a little clever about how you ask something. Don't you ask it like you want to know about them.
Well, yeah, you can literally say, I think that, send somebody a message, because like I get a lot of friend requests on Facebook and I don't add just random people. But if someone sends me a message and is like, hey, I'm brand new to goth and I'm trying to learn and discover some things, would you mind like helping me out? Or if they say, hey, I've listened to the podcast before, I just wanted to send you a friend request, then I'm always happy to have those conversations and add those people. And maybe that's a good thing to do. Just be open about it. I think that's
just getting
incredibly
into goth. Benevolent of you. You're like the baby bat shepherd.
Well, I try to be, and Trey, I don't know if you had, because you said kind of the same thing. I don't know if you have had a similar experience, but I know when I was trying to get into, not when I was first getting into goth, but when I was trying to get into the Chicago scene and trying to connect with people, I ended up being involved with someone that I didn't know at the time, but they were a shit person that was toxic in the scene and everybody hated them. But because they were very outgoing, that was appealing to me because I'm kind of shy and introverted. So they kind of kept conversations going, and they were like, oh, let me introduce you to this. Let me introduce you to that. But all the while kind of trying to make me like their like little, slave lackey kind of thing. And that ended up being a really bad experience. Like they lied to me about, they said they had Roz Williams ashes. They made up stories about like being in a relationship with Yerke from 69 Eyes, and made up experiences about Peter Murphy.
Probably did have Roz Williams ashes. It's a great album.
Yeah. Bump. So like I had that experience of, I want to get involved in the scene. I was trying to be a DJ. She was a promoter, so she got me a few shows, and I was like, oh, great, I have this person, and they have this little friend group. And I ended up wasting a few years being involved with these people that were just kind of shitty. So it's really hard.
The scene's so ADD, they forget everything.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
You can start over whenever you want.
Yeah,
So I never had I guess I can't say I had a similar experience, but given the way I've interacted with all the scenes that I've been a part of, the only reason I didn't is because I was lucky. Because always the way I've gotten into any local scene is I am a diehard total introvert lurker. So I will go to a club and I'll show up every week and not interact with anybody at all. I'll just show up. I'll observe. I'll stand on the side. As when I first started, that's all I would do. Then I started doing a little dancing and learning how to do that. Now I'm pretty confident in my dancing, so I'm more comfortable.
I've seen you.
Dancing
you can really bust a move.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I will mention again for the third time that DJ Andy Harriman, who has DJ'd all over the world, said you were the best goth dancer she's ever seen. So.
Yes, and I am immensely flattered by that.
And yet, I'm like, who's the dancer? I'm going to have a dance off with you, Trey. That's it.
Please.
Next dark wave that comes on.
That's fine, but I'm not a competitive
in the year 2023.
Dancing's a conversation, but I'm happy to have a chat with you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, boy.
So So that's fine. But no, I'm more comfortable with that now. So I'm more comfortable just going on the dance floor. And I've also developed the I don't really care at this point. Again, kind of like what you were saying, Count. I've been involved in the scene well enough. I have enough contacts, enough people that if I'm not accepted somewhere, I know I'm accepted somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that's a luxury that comes with age and experience and just being a part of something for as long as we have. But yeah, as far as getting into any local thing, my sort of rule of thumb has been I go to a club for a year. And after a year, someone eventually said, I've seen you here all of the time for a very long time. And I don't know who you are. And someone comes up and introduces themselves to me. And I've just gotten lucky so far that the person who did that is not a toxic individual that's loathed in the scene and tried to manipulate me as a follower. So like I said, I was definitely putting myself in a position to be, captured in someone's orbit like that. But so far I've just generally been lucky. But that's been my thing, is whether it was online as a net goth or going out to clubs, I would just go and I would hang out, I would observe, I would learn, and eventually wait for someone to approach me. And that's worked for me. And that's definitely the safe, but unfortunately very, very slow way of learning and getting into anything.
It is slow, and not everyone's a risk taker. And when they're really, really afraid, which a lot of us are, if we're stepping into like an uncharted sea, I think it's slow and steady. It's still pretty reliable.
So let's do this. I think we only got through about half of these questions. But let's I think maybe what we can do is save the rest for a part 2 at some point.
Sounds cool.
So that this episode isn't 4 hours long.
I think that's fair, because I really, really loved some of these questions that you picked out. Like, especially like, there were some girly ass questions. I'm your girl on here. It's like, tips to be in a hot and sunny country. And I'm like, girl, I know that one.
Yeah, maybe. Let's. I think we might. Well, maybe.
And what place does being goth have in the world? And I'm like, dude, so many
That's
places.
a great question. Yeah.
I love that question.
Yeah, so let's.
So
I'm gonna save these, and we'll see if next month or the month after we can do a part 2 for this.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you
right.
so much for,
Perfect.
like having me, I should say, because Trey, you're here.
I'm here in general, but it's always
Yes.
a pleasure to be on here as well.
Weren't you
I'm still honored every time I'm here.
Weren't you dubbed the herpes of the podcast? Was that a thing at some point?
Oh no!
Was that it?
That's something I missed. That's so sad. I missed
I
that.
don't remember.
It's not one that I'm familiar
Okay.
with, but
Well,
usually the herpes isn't the one that's told that.
Don't worry. I mean, in the burlesque world, you just be called glitter.
Yeah. I mean, glitter is the herpes of craft supplies, so
It totally is, though. John is out of the room because he's out smoking, but he would attest to him cleaning up glitter explosions around this house angrily.
there's no such thing as cleaning up glitter. There's only damping its overwhelming effect.
Yeah.
He's pretty pissed about it.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
That DIY life, though.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Did either or both of you listen to the album? Or
I did.
Can we? Did you get a chance, Lady India?
I don't think I ever did. I'm sorry.
Okay. So no, that's totally fine. So I think what we can do then is just we won't keep you. We can wrap up, and then Trey and I can record the album review section, so that you can go have your tacos.
Oh yeah, that's right. My late
yes.
night tacos. It's bordering around the time I might leave an early closing bar, so we can.
Right.
That's an officiality of late night taco there.
Are there any social media or websites or anything you want to direct people to find you or to find your stuff?
Yeah. Thank you so much for allowing me to do that. I have not yet done this, but I'm going to start a Patreon based on the fact that I have more to offer than just TNA. So, I mean, let's face it, that's what it's kind of used for now. But I'm going to start a Patreon, so I'm going to tell folks to keep their eyes peeled for that. There is my Instagram, which is at LadyIndia_RAKS. Which kind of showcases my polymath self. And for those who don't know, polymath means kind of just a Jill of all trades who doesn't suck at anything that she tries to do. So, and not to like be braggy, but I just found out what that word means.
Hey, be braggy.
Woo. Words. And there's a Facebook page that I guess it's like a fan page, which is Lady India Official. I think that's what it is. Wow, I really should be better about that. But anyway, I encourage people to also check out Phantasmagoria Theater, which is Antibiotics Productions LLC, owned by myself and Lennox. And we tend to make our very gothy burlesque and variety show performances. And that ends up getting showcased in various different theaters, so you kind of have to keep your eyes on the page to see where the next one will be.
Cool. Amazing. And I'll do my best to get all of those links in the show notes, so for anyone listening, you can take a look at the notes, and there should be links to all of those in there. I don't use Patreon for that, but I have been thinking about starting an OnlyFans with just only photos of my gaping asshole, and I don't know if that would get any. I don't know if anyone's into that, but I'll put stuff in my butt for money. I've been thinking about that, so we'll see.
Are you going to go by Count Goatsy?
I'm not going that far. No.
You could have Link stick it on the walls for you to try out the height.
Yeah, that might be illegal if that's recorded. But yeah, let's not go down that road.
Kind of like a combination of anal sex and long jump ring toss.
No, that's what I would call a shameless plug.
Hey-o. All right, so let's do this album review.
Yep. Yes, we're reviewing the album Black Kiss by the artist Vandal Moon.
And I'm going to play the track Robot Lover.
Free all the disc
All right, so a little background information about the band. They are based in Santa Cruz. They say they're inspired by various acts of the new wave post-punk synth pop and dark wave scenes of the early 80s, and particularly by bands such as The Cure, The Chameleons, New Order, Gary Newman, Depeche Mode, Joy Division, Sisters of Mercy, and the Psychedelic Furs. Quote, "This is our first concept album. It's the futuristic love story of two androids escaping enslavement, and they have to do some unthinkable things to find that freedom. I won't give too much of the story away, but it's thematically and corollarily... Wait. Thematically and...
Where are you?
No, I'm lost.
Oh.
But it's thematically a corollary
There you go.
about living life as a cog in a dystopian culture. So this album functions as a concept record, but also as a personal expression of dread." And I should mention, this album does not come out until March 15th. I think that's correct, because I've lost my page now.
It was something along those lines. It was upcoming, not released yet, and I don't think it would be March. It would be May.
Yeah, sorry, May 14th, May 15th, somewhere around there. So it won't be available to buy as of this episode release, but it'll be soon.
Yeah, in your notes you said release date May 15th.
Okay, let's go with that. I don't know why that's not in my notes,
cool.
But whatever. So I'll give my thoughts first, because I don't usually go first. So I overall really like the vibe of this album, even though it's not really my go-to genre. I kind of like synthwave in small doses. So to that extent, I did enjoy this album. I thought the production was really well done. Most of the tracks had really catchy and strong melodies and hooks that I could dance to, which I enjoy. I also thought there was a decent variety of music, which we've both mentioned we appreciate. However, I do think when you are making an album and varying the sound, you risk having songs that don't connect with some people. For me, that was, what was it? We Live Forever. I'm pretty sure that was the one I wasn't too fond of, because it was more kind of like bubblegum pop to my ears. And yeah, it just wasn't really my cup of tea. I think that may have been actually thematically the point of the song. But just from a listening perspective, it just wasn't really my thing. And actually, speaking of lyrics, he kind of talked about the concept of the album. I didn't really pay attention to the lyrics, which maybe was a good thing, because it sounds like the story is kind of depressing, and I've been really depressed in this self-isolation state that I'm in. So just listening to the music, though, was actually kind of great, because it's very lush and it's very kind of comforting, and listening to it put me in a good mood if I'm not paying attention to what the song is actually about. So that was a nice change of pace for me with everything going on in my life. Overall, I really like the variety of synth work, because you have some newer sounding synthwave stuff mixed with tracks like Suicidal City Girl. That song incorporated a lot of 80s synth pop sounds. My favorite track was the one we played, though. And to me, it sounded like a combination of Wolfsheim and Culture is what I got out of that. But it was really catchy, and I really enjoyed listening to it. So overall, if I have to give it a rating, I'm going to say 4 out of 5. And like I said before, it's not something I would say is a goth album, and certainly the musician, the composer, he also mentioned he's not a goth, but he has a fondness for the music and the culture. So you definitely get some of that influence. And I think this is like a kind of goth adjacent thing that a lot of people could appreciate.
Cool. And just to I guess fill in the gap there, from the page, the band is made up of friends since childhood, duo comprised of Blake Voss, vocals, guitar, synthesizers, and Jeremy Einsadler, drum machines and synthesizers.
Cool.
So this album actually was pretty convenient that it came out at this time because I'd been getting into the synthwave and synthwave adjacent genres over the past several months since I just started discovering it. Probably back last fall, maybe. I'm trying to remember when I started hearing about it initially and digging into it. I think I first started with vaporwave. That's, I think, the first thing I started getting into, which is a whole nother beast.
Yeah.
That's very much not goth adjacent, even in the
Yeah.
slightest.
Yeah.
But I enjoy it too, and a lot of
I
that
enjoy
is
it too,
just
yeah.
it pokes at my 80s nostalgia too, since I
Yeah.
did grow up in that era. And as a kid in that era, things like TV commercial jingles and infomercial stabs and mall background ambient music is the stuff that was the soundtrack of my childhood as I was wandering around watching TV and living life in the malls of the 80s. So hearing those things repurposed and recodified into these chopped and screwed works of art, which I mean, I also like collage based music, which is the other aspect of vaporwave. So I started getting into that and then branched out into synthwave and have been also getting into, just more synth work, keyboard stuff just on my own. So getting into some of these sounds and some of the classic synthesizers of the era. So getting into synthwave is just something I've been generally doing. And while I do lean more towards the dark synth genre rather than synthwave itself, synthwave tends to be, as you already kind of mentioned, a little bit poppier. I mean, it's not pop wave, which is the pop avenue of the synthwave spectrum. But I mean, synthwave started as, what was it called? It was Outrun, which was an old video game, which is driving a Ferrari on the beach kind of racing game. So a very poppy, beachy kind of vibe. And that was the initial inspiration on Outrun, which was sort of the germ from which synthwave came in the early 2000s to 2010s. So that's why it has that sort of poppy feel. And I think this album, it's not a synthwave album either. They definitely, Vandal Moon is active within synthwave communities as far as doing stuff, as is, it was a FM Attack, who is a major synthwave artist and did a few of their tracks, at least the instrumental aspects of their tracks. But FM Attack is a big synthwave artist. So there was a lot of that sound in there, especially with, as you said, the very lush, rich, and it's that sort of warm sound of vintage 80s synthesizers, that old, they're not quite as pristine. They weren't digital. They were all analog tube and all that. So a lot of that warm distortion, warm sound is something that's very characteristic of a lot of the 80s synth sound, especially from what they're taking from in synthwave, which is more inspirations not from your new wave and synth pop and the actual music genres from back then that were focusing on those synth sounds. It's really it's very limited relation to that. It's more related to the soundtrack music of the era. Your Vangelis's and Tangerine Dream, your Blade Runner soundtrack, Legend. It's that kind of feel that a lot of these synthwave artists are kind of glomming onto, and more of a sort of idealized future. It's how I've read it in some reviews, is just, it is the music of the future that was dreamed of in the 80s.
I like
rather than being music of the 80s,
Yeah.
synth music like synth pop, it's the music that was dreamed of in the 80s as the future music.
I dig that.
So that's, I've liked that description. I think that's a good way to do it, because there is a very significant difference between synthwave and synth pop. They're not really related genres other than the era. Same thing with new wave. They all come from different roots and they have very different origins, despite having a similar sound, and are often mistaken for one another because of similarities in the name. But so this album itself it definitely has elements of synthwave. I would not put it as a synthwave album. It is probably closer to a synth pop album in its feel, and that is also what they claim in the description too, since they're harkening back to, like The Cure, The Chameleons, New Order, Gary Newman, Depeche Mode. A couple of those are very clearly synth pop or new wave bands. So they're definitely harkening back to that, but with some of the modern production techniques and modern stylistic flourishes of synthwave. So I did find that a very interesting combination. And then I really did enjoy the vocalist, which is interesting because sometimes he would put on that character that I've lambasted other goth band vocalists about, the sort of stereotypical goth, do the very resonant voice, sort of monotone and that sort of thing, where he does that. But then it's like he does a couple lines with that, and then he does the sort of anguished, passionate voice as a contrast. And I liked that play between those two sort of vocal styles. And I do like artists that have dynamism in their vocal delivery, where it's not just this monotone thing all the way through, this one voice, this one vocal persona. It changes with the emotion in the song, and it gives you that tension and release that makes, for me at least, for a good experience of listening to music. So I enjoyed that, listening to his vocals. But yeah, I really enjoyed the very warm sound. I loved the Moog bass. At least I'm pretty sure that was a Moog synthesizer doing that bass, because it just had that very fat, warm, pulsing bass sound that is endemic to that particular synthesizer. But hearing that pulse with these, interesting, at times disconnected goth vocals, and at other times impassioned sort of yelps. Yelps isn't quite right, because he didn't get that over the top, I guess, but a very expressive and more passionate sound. I love that combination with the very pristine and spacious synth wave production. So I really enjoyed all of that. I don't really have any particular tracks that stood out to me. I enjoyed a lot of them for all sorts of different reasons. And I'd have to go back and listen to them and write notes on all of them, which I didn't do. I mostly spent time listening to it multiple times, kind of while I was working or while I was driving to do errands or whatever. So I wasn't necessarily paying attention to which track I was listening to, just enjoying the experience as a whole. And I also wasn't necessarily paying much attention to the lyrics. So I don't necessarily have a lot of comments on that. But just the experience of listening to the album I thought was very enjoyable. So I think as a rating for me, I'll go right along lines with you. I think a 4 out of 5 is good as well.
Fantastic. And yes, that album is out now, so I will have a link to where you can get that and listen to it in the show notes. It was not available at the time we recorded, and I actually thought this episode was going to be going up earlier. But also another note from what something we mentioned in the show, we will be doing a part 2. That is already confirmed. So Lady India, myself, Trey, and friendly house poltergeist John will be joining us again to answer more of your questions on Reddit. And you know what? What the hell? If you've got a question that you want us to address in a kind of Q&A style, go ahead and email it to me. That would be cemeteryconfessions@gmail.com. Before I let you know what we're going to be returning with in 2 weeks, and it's going to be a killer episode, I'm going to thank our Patreon members, because holy shit, if you haven't noticed, it's scary out there. People are losing their jobs. People are having serious financial difficulties. However, we still have an amazing, amazing community around Cemetery Confessions, both on Discord and those who support us through our Patreon page. I just sent out a whole bunch of rewards to our founders level tier. So thank you for supporting us. I'm going to, as always, once a month, thank everyone who supports us on Patreon. So here we go. At the founders level, we have Esmeralda, Abigail, SJ, Cadaver Kelly, Junkyard Bat, and Samantha. Thank you all so much for your support in April. At the Nocturnal Council level, we have Christine, Nephilim Incorruptus, Michelle, Natalie, DJ Azzy, Mike Mess, Dawn, Fifth Dream, Amy, I Am Ruin, Sav, Jacob, Skullgirdle, Jen, Sebastian, Hayshaker, and Moses. Thank you all so much for your support. And then at the Crow's Call level, we have Jay Internus, Isabel, Dom, Marco, Angel, Alex Kennedy of We Have a Technical, Anne, Heather, Marissa, Swampire, David, Alex Grufty, Kelly, Dagger Dance, Caroline Carnivorous, Alana, Irene, Susan, Kay, Mark, King Rhinex, Jonathan, Wolfie, Jason, David, Morgan, Kevin, Top Down Tom, Eduardo, Jan, my son yelling about Fortnite in the background, Richard, Gendalis, Isabel, Elizabeth, Jennifer, Kevin, Bruce Lord, Enya, Felina, Keen, Anna, Death Metal Kumbaya, Laura, Ava, Stewart, Nia, Martin, Dry Is She, Gateway Goth Events, Morgan, GPS, Two Broke Goths, Eternal Winter, Megan, Nick, Esther, Paul, Laura, Rebecca, Leah, and Captain Faust. Absolute incredible show of support. Thank you all so much. This is why I take the time, of course, to say thank you, to say your name, to keep you at the top of my mind because of all the support you provide the podcast. It really does mean more than I can ever say. So with that, I promised I would tease our show for next week. We're going to be returning with, not next week, it'll be June 2nd. Holy shit, it's the year is moving fast. We're going to be back with an episode about aging in youth subculture, and it's going to be one of our panel episodes. So if you remember our industrial and sexism episode, our Black Goths episode, our disability and goth episode, we're going to be returning with a whole panel of experts, and we're going to be talking about aging and getting old and what it means to be old in goth. And we're going to hear some stories from the 80s from all over the world. Unless somebody cancels, since we're teasing. Now, of course, nothing is ever assured until it's actually recorded. But we should have perspectives from the LA scene in the 80s, the German scene in the 80s, the England scene, and Middle America. So I think that's going to be a fascinating episode with a lot of interesting conversation. So I hope you come back, subscribe if you haven't, check out our Patreon page if you want to see what kind of rewards you can get. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Until next time, stay dark.
The preceding program is a member of The Belfry, a network of blogs, podcasts, and videos for the darkly inclined. Go to thebelfry.rip for more information.